Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison. Welcome, listeners, to another episode of the SDSU podcast. I'm your host, Andre Hagberdian. We'll be joined shortly by my co-host, Paul Garrison. This is episode 90 of the podcast. Crazy to believe that we have put in 90 episodes in less than 2 years. So obviously we wouldn't have done it without you guys, the listeners, the followers, everyone that supported not just the podcast, but our work at the East Village Times. So we want to thank you guys, as always, for that. It's UCLA game week. You know, earlier in the week, gave you an episode where we recapped the Idaho State game and gave grades for each of the positional units. The grades obviously were not very high, despite getting the victory over an FCS team. I think a lot of the positional units underperformed, and our grades reflected that. But it's a new game week. UCLA is coming to town. Pac-12 team, a big contest on CBS. So I think the Aztecs are preparing to put together a great performance and hopefully get the victory. To give you guys a little bit of more insight into UCLA than just Paul and I talking about what we've learned or read or watched, I got a chance to catch up with Matt Stevens earlier this week. He is a former UCLA quarterback from the mid-'80s. He played quarterback from 1983 to 1987 at UCLA, started and won a Rose Bowl game. He is also the current radio color analyst for UCLA radio. So he actually will be calling the game on radio for UCLA with his play-by-play partner. He was gracious enough to give me about 20 minutes of his time to give me his thoughts on the UCLA, their victory over Coastal Carolina last Saturday, and what we can expect to see this Saturday. So let's get to that interview, and then Paul and I will be back to close it out with some of our thoughts and our prediction. We want to welcome Matt Stevens to the SDSU podcast. Matt is a former UCLA quarterback and current radio analyst for 570 AM LA Sports. So we're excited to get some insight from him on UCLA, San Diego State will be playing this coming Saturday. How's it going today, Matt?
It's going pretty good. Yeah, the Bruins came off a real nice victory of Coastal Carolina. Not the offensive output they thought, but the defense really did well.
Yeah, you can't not talk about the quarterback situation. You yourself as a former UCLA quarterback, there's three guys competing for that spot. I think I just saw the depth chart come out this morning. There's still, an or with all three guys. Dante Moore, Ethan Garbers played against Coastal Carolina. Colin Schlee, I think Chip Kelly said yesterday he wanted to get him in, wasn't able to, but that he will play this week. How can you kind of compare what those guys do best, and how do you ultimately see that playing out?
Well, Chip Kelly said it's going to be determined on the field how these guys play and who's going to win the game for them. Ethan Garbers got the start. He's the older guy out of the three, and he came out and he was playing really well, but he made a couple of mistakes, and then in the second half, Dante Moore came in, and this is about as talented a freshman as I've seen, and he was able to lead UCLA to a couple of second-half scores and ultimately put that game away. Colin Schlee didn't have an opportunity because of the score, but he's more a running RPO quarterback. They want to try and get him in against San Diego State. It's going to be interesting, though, who's going to start. Is Chip Kelly going to stick with Ethan Garbers, or is he going to go with Dante Moore, who really sort of on the field led that offense really well and surprisingly for just a freshman?
At least for one game, we didn't really see many quarterback runs for UCLA. Do you think that was just a one-game anomaly, or is that something that might scale over the course of the year?
Well, I mean, you're used to seeing DTR, UCLA, and they run the zone read. He would run the ball anywhere between 10 and 12 times a game. Both Ethan Garbers, Dante Moore, they're not that type of runner. In fact, Dante Moore is more of a pocket passer. He likes to buy time and get rid of the football down the field. Ethan Garbers didn't really have an opportunity to run the ball. He was under a lot of pressure. It seemed like Coastal Carolina was confusing UCLA with a particular blitz, sending guys up the A-gap. Colin Shee is probably more like DTR. You'll see him running the ball, and I'm sure Chip Kelly wants that weapon in his offensive attack, and that's why they want to give him a chance to play. But, with the other two quarterbacks, it's a different offense than it was the last 4 years under DTR.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see because Chip Kelly mentioned the package that they have for Colin, and I'm sure that kind of revolved around more of his foot, his speed. Transfers are a name of the game in college football, right? Teams are able to turn over a roster in one off season without having guys needing to sit out. You can bring in talented, experienced players, even within conference now. UCLA has a ton of those. J. Mike Sturdivant, wide receiver from Cal. Carson Steele, a running back transfer from Ball State. Sturdivant had a big game against Coastal. Steele had, I believe, 78 rushing yards. What have those guys brought to the offense this year?
Michael Sturdivant, they call him J. Mike. He's probably one of the top receivers in the country. 6'3", 215. I call him Mini Megatron. He is the fastest guy. He can jump the highest. He could probably be on the basketball team. He has twitch moves. He's really quick. I mean, this guy's an NFL first rounder. So, I mean, it doesn't matter who's playing quarterback for UCLA. You're going to throw to J. Mike. And J. Mike cannot be guarded one-on-one. I mean, you're going to have to put a safety over the top or walk out, a safety underneath him. He's just a special talent. And then if you throw in Kyle Ford on the other side, the transfer from USC, he's 6'2", 225. This is an experienced wideout. He's a guy that knows how to run crisp routes, get open. He didn't have as many opportunities as J. Mike did in that game just because of pass protection problems. I do like Carson Steele. Carson Steele is very versatile, the running back. He can catch the football. He's a hard runner. T.J. Harden might be the guy, though. I mean, T.J. Harden's the guy that played as a freshman. He knows how to run, very experienced running back, low center of gravity, gets tough yards. Both those guys are going to do a great job, I think, for Chip Kelly, who likes to run the ball.
Yeah, you mentioned in the beginning about how the defense came through against Coastal Carolina. I mean, you have to start with the defensive line. I think Latu and Murphy, I think, are the two top-graded pass rushers in week one. Latu had 3 sacks. I think I read somewhere he said his goal was 15 sacks this year, so he's well on the way to that. What do those guys do to kind of wreck an offensive game plan based on their pressure?
So Latu, he's a big dude. I mean, he's 6'5", 265, and he looks like he's 230 the way he moves around. And he has a year under his belt with Chip Kelly. He's in better shape. He had to sit out football with a neck injury when he was at Washington before he transferred to UCLA. So I think he's, where he wants to be physically. He's a first rounder as well. Latu and J. Mike are the two best players on UCLA's football team. And it's actually the Murphy twins. There's 2 of them. They're identical. And, number 11 and number 12. And it's interesting how they use those twins in passing situations. They put them at defensive tackle. They're only 260. They're from Texas. They're real ornery. They really scrap it up, but they're fast. And you throw them in with Latu and also Carl Jones, and you got a real fast defensive line on third down situations. And UCLA, this is probably their best front 7 on defense under Chip Kelly. Jay Toya, 325 pounds. He did a great job against Coastal Carolina. UCLA, they held them to only 56 yards rushing. So this front 7 for UCLA on defense is really good.
One of those guys, linebacker Darius Muasau, is someone San Diego State fans should be familiar with. He was a two-time All-Conference Mountain West first team when he was at Hawaii before he transferred to UCLA. What has he added to the defense?
Well, he's just experienced. He has great instincts. He's really good on pass coverage. He's a guy that gets everybody lined up. UCLA, they have actually 8 linebackers they can play, and it's good to have a guy that has been there for a year, Muasau. He just brings that experience factor. Another guy that UCLA is really impressed with and did well against Coastal Carolina is Kane Madrano. He switched from wide receiver. He's a sideline-to-sideline guy. He's just all over the field, and he didn't show on the stats, but he had probably one of his best games against Coastal Carolina.
Yeah, for most of the last decade, San Diego State was, being referred to kind of as an RBU. They had Ronnie Hillman, Adam Muema, Donald Pumphrey broke the NCAA record, Rashad Penny. They haven't had that major running back for the last few years now, but they're still a very run-oriented offense, even more so this year because of the lack of depth at wide receiver. UCLA pretty much shut down Coastal Carolina's running game. How does that run defense stack up against San Diego State this week?
Well, I mean, that's what UCLA wants to do. I mean, is stop the team from running the football. And that's going to be very important that Jalen Maiden, the quarterback of San Diego State, gets some opportunities running the ball. He's going to have to be a difference maker for them to get the ball down the field. UCLA, they have aggressive safeties that like to come up to the line of scrimmage on run support. Danton Lynn's the new offensive coordinator, and he has a real aggressive style. But, the key for UCLA is, stop the run first. They have improved in their pass defense, but they just don't want to get run upon.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the run offense versus the run defense works, because I think that could be potentially where the game is decided. Special teams, San Diego State has always had a really good special teams under coordinator Doug Deacon. We don't know about the punters, but they're great on returns and coverage. Where does UCLA special teams stack up as a unit?
Well, first of all, I got to say I'm pretty impressed with Jack Browning. I mean, he does it all for the kicking game for San Diego State. UCLA, they have to use different guys to kick it off and punt. But UCLA actually did really well in special teams. And they have a new snapper, they have a new punter, and they have a new kicker. So I thought that was really good. There was really no mistakes. Maybe the opening kickoff, it went out of bounds. But other than that, they were all touchbacks. And I thought special teams did really well. And that's something, in the first game, you often see mistakes, but UCLA shored that up. But going into the San Diego State game, you said it. I mean, they've always had great kickers. It's a real proud trademark of the program.
Yeah, it's definitely, some would say, that a couple of years ago when they won 12 games, it was built off of basically special teams and defense, so they've definitely utilized that as a strength for the last several years. You live in San Diego. I know you call UCLA games, but you're a San Diegan. And obviously, you're focused on UCLA games on Saturdays. But are you able to keep up with San Diego State football throughout the season? And what are your thoughts about Brady Hoke and what he's done with the program?
Well, I think Brady Hoke just sort of followed Rocky Long, and it's all about defense at San Diego State. They play a real aggressive type defense, and they're going to win the game with good defense and controlling the ball, taking a lot of time off the clock. I think the addition of Ryan Lindley is a good one. I think that's going to help Maiden a lot in terms of throwing the ball. I thought San Diego State relied a lot more on the run. But I know a lot of these kids. I used to coach at Helix a while back. I think San Diego State's a great program. And I'll tell you, Snapdragon's off the charts. Yeah. I'm expecting a sellout. There's a lot of UCLA people here in San Diego, but it's a pretty easy drive. I know there's tickets still available, but I think they're going to go pretty fast because there's going to be a lot of UCLA people want to come down here and check out the new stadium. And it's going to be a really good game. I mean, San Diego State, they already have 2 games under their belt, both wins. Last time UCLA played San Diego State at the Rose Bowl, San Diego State won. So this is going to be a really good game, real good test. I mean, San Diego State with Brady Hoke, you always see a team that's going to fight you to the end. So I expect a good game on Saturday.
Have you been to Snapdragon before?
I've been for the Monster Jam, and I saw 2 Legion games there, the rugby, and I just loved it. Yeah, the Monster Jam's always cool. The Legion I thought was really, really good, but the whole atmosphere when you get there, it's it's made for fans, and I like the standing room only, but there's not a bad seat in the house. You're right there. Hopefully it won't be too hot. I know it's a 4:30 kickoff, but it'll cool down maybe, and the sun will be behind the stadium after a while. But I think it's going to be a great afternoon.
If you can point out one area of the game, one statistic that we'll look back on after the game that'll say, that decided the outcome, what do you think that would be?
I think really turnovers. I know it's sort of a cliche, but I think both defenses are going to tee off on each other's offense. This game's going to be played between the 30s, I think, for about a quarter and a half, and then some team's going to break through and score. I know one thing, San Diego State doesn't want to happen is fall behind UCLA by a touchdown or 10 points, because that might have to change their game plan. UCLA, they're going to, obviously the quarterback position's not settled. They like to run the ball. I do think that everybody should go and see this game because Michael Sturdivant, Mike on the outside, Mini Megatron, is going to be one of the best college football players this year. He's going to be exciting, and that's going to be a handful for the Aztecs. But I think this is going to be a close one.
Last question before I let you go. Obviously, it's not related to this game, but it's related to conference realignment. We know the big stock last year came with UCLA and USC announcing their move to the Big Ten. That's obviously set off a chain reaction. As a former UCLA football alum and a Pac-12 member, what's your immediate reaction to how things have played out and where the Pac, started, as of next year?
I just think it's extremely sad. The Pac-12 conference was a great conference, completely mismanaged at the top. They just couldn't get a TV deal done. They went and tried to do something different. And what happened, why USC and UCLA left, the TV revenue wasn't there. They could get a better deal, twice as much at another conference, and which was the Big Ten. And it's just sad that the upper management of the Pac-12 conference just let it go away. The hard thing, too, I know what UCLA and USC were complaining about, were all these night games at 7:30. It's hard to get your attendance up that late at night. Those games, they're not being televised, so much all the way across the country, or if they are, you're up at 2:30 in the morning watching a Pac-12 game. It just doesn't make any sense, and it was completely mismanaged. And it's not the university's fault. They're just going with the times. Everything's changed. It's the Wild West right now with NIL and in the portal. I'm just going to tell you, it's sad that the Pac-12 is gone because it was a great conference.
Yeah, I think reading about and talking to San Diego State folks, there was a 15-minute period on that Friday morning, maybe a month ago, where they thought they were getting invited to become the 10th team in the Pac, and then turns into, not many teams left. So San Diego State, I think, is still well positioned for some sort of expansion in the future, but I don't think what they were aiming for next year is gonna come to fruition. So it's a little disappointing on the San Diego State side, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I still think there's going to be a lot more realignment. I think the whole game's going to change. I don't think what we're seeing right now with the expansion of the other four conferences in the Pac-2, I don't think that's going to be what's going to happen with college football. I actually think college football is going to separate itself. Still going to be affiliated with universities, but it's going to become an independent sport. The other thing is, all the other sports. You do like Stanford, Cal, they're now in the ACC. Well, what's going to happen when the baseball team has to fly across the country all the time? And it's not going to work. So they're going to have to come up with something. And they're also going to have to come up with some kind of NIL cap. Like I said, it's just the wild, wild west right now. You just don't know. It's not regulated, and it's a little crazy right now. You got to have some kind of structure.
Very curious to see how it all plays out. But for now, we're at the 2023 season. Every conference is set, and we'll see how things play out. UCLA, San Diego State on Saturday night, 4:30, Snapdragon Stadium. Matt will be on the call for UCLA Radio, 570 AM, LA Sports. We look forward to seeing how that game plays out. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Look forward to a great game on Saturday.
Episode of the SDSU podcast is sponsored by Marz Energy Cream, the first ever topical energy delivery product. Think energy drink, but it's a lotion. It contains a proprietary blend of natural ingredients, including caffeine, taurine, and B vitamins, to provide an energizing boost. And unlike traditional energy drinks and gels, Marz Energy Cream is sugar-free, contains no artificial flavors, colors, or preservatives. If you want to try it out, go to marzenergydrinkcream.com and use the code Andre, spelled ANDRE, at checkout to receive 15% off a purchase of a 50 milliliter tube. All right, Paul, we just heard from Matt Stevens, a former UCLA quarterback from the mid-'80s who does radio color analyst for the UCLA games now and has been doing it for a while. I actually am good friends with his wife. I've known her for probably over 15 years. You know, we connected with our day jobs, you know, back in the day. My company used her company for vendor services. So I remember her telling me back then when we met, and obviously sports came up, and that her husband was a former UCLA player and did the radio games. And I was like, who? You know, because back then, you know, I didn't watch UCLA in the 80s, but like once I started watching UCLA in the 90s, you know, you would hear Matt Stevens' name come up when you would watch UCLA games and when they would talk about past quarterbacks and Troy Aikman and this and that. So it was really cool. So I appreciate Matt coming on. I know I got some insight from him on the Holiday Bowl game 2 years ago for my preview for that game, a game that didn't happen, right? We all know about that.
But it turned out to be the best. Your preview turned out to be the best part of that entire holiday.
Yeah. So, you know what, you weren't able to unfortunately make that interview, but listening to it, what were your takeaways on what he had to say about the UCLA team?
Well, he's either very diplomatic or he's a little bit worried about this game. In contrast to the hordes of people who, after the 9-point spread came out, rushed to take UCLA. You know, Matt just seemed a little more measured with where he thinks this game is going to be. You know, I thought his just insight on more than, you know, a highlight reel, more than watching a good chunk of the Coastal Carolina game, but just the insight into how good the players are, defensive end, wide receiver. I thought that was really, really good. And I thought that, you know, just the insight of where the quarterback competition is, I think was the most insightful, given that they're expecting there to be three. And, you know, just exactly where all three of them are, how they fit. And I think, you know, what San Diego State fans can be looking out for in that upcoming game.
I agree. I think the quarterback unsettledness is probably the biggest factor here. You know, when San Diego State beat UCLA in 2019, they caught them in a good year. You know, DTR had not mastered Chip Kelly's offense yet because it was early in Chip Kelly's tenure. And they were in a transition with some of their defensive players and skill players, and they got them at a good time. And this, you can make the argument that this is also a good time to catch UCLA, despite the fact that they brought in some elite transfers and talented players. You know, the quarterback situation is still unsettled, and Dante Moore is a 5-star guy, and maybe in a year or two we'll be talking about him, you know, getting drafted in the first round of the NFL. But it's not, you're obviously not there yet. And so this could be a good timing to grab and play UCLA at home and you know, look to get another victory, second victory in 24 matchups between San Diego State and UCLA. Chip Kelly knows what he's doing. He's been a coach for a long time. There's got to be a reason why he wants to continue to play 2-3 guys. So, you know, we're not at practice. But if you read a lot of these UCLA beat writers and podcasters and bloggers, I mean, they're all basically saying we don't understand how Dante Moore has not been given the starting role and to play all game. So we'll see. We'll see how who gets the first drive, how they're split up. Chip Kelly wants Colin Schlee to play, and as Matt pointed out, he's the running quarterback out of the trio, and maybe he wants a package in there so that you could, you know, get a defense thinking about a running quarterback and more RPOs and this and that. So we'll see how that plays out. But that's probably a big reason why San Diego State would have a good chance in this game, despite being a big underdog, is to maybe take advantage of some of that unsettledness at quarterback.
The thing that you look for in a game like this is you want to be able to find, like, where could San Diego State have an advantage? I think the one thing that you would point to is Coastal Carolina got a lot of pressure on the quarterback. They gave up a lot of pressure. And, I think given how, well, that's a different tangent, but I think that's another really big place with this. I think coaches are usually a lot better in touch with their players than the fans and the media. I think the reason that they're calling for the 5-star freshman to play is because he has 5 stars in front of his name. And obviously he played very, very well. But, they had a long competition and he didn't win it. And that's not for, no reason. And I think the other part of it is that, you look at what Idaho State did and you look at what Ohio did playing 2 quarterbacks, and it didn't seem to be a huge effect. Like San Diego State didn't, take advantage of the fact that there were other people in the game. And so that could be another reason, is you're wanting to find out who your best players are. And maybe you just think that you're better and you're going to win. And so like you're not going to be able to say that down the road. So you want to go with 3 quarterbacks and see if one of them actually turns out to be the better player in a game, because, as we've talked about a lot, college football does not have preseason games.
I think previewing this game or researching this game for the preview, I think the most interesting statistic is the fact that these defenses combined for 9 offsides last week.
Me too.
The Aztecs had 5.
5 accepted.
They
had more.
San Diego State had 4. So both of these teams had some discipline issues in that regard. UCLA figured it out late because they were able to eventually not get offsides and get a bunch of sacks, where San Diego State definitely didn't. And that's a product of maybe Idaho State, who got the ball out. But, the defensive line for UCLA is elite. We know about those guys if you listen to Matt, if you read my preview. But, I mean, that goes into the whole topic of penalties. Obviously, for San Diego State, they had 9 other penalties other than the offsides. A lot of holding on the offensive side, a lot of defensive pass interference. That has to be cleaned up. And I know Coach Hoke always starts with himself and the coaching staff on how to fix it. But, we always say, like, that's the players have to fix those penalties, because as much as a coach can talk about technique and fundamentals, it's ultimately the player that needs to execute on the field. And if you take a bad step as a lineman and then you have to hold a guy to keep them from, obliterating your quarterback, you got to make sure you're disciplined and execute your player. If a defensive guy, if you grab your receiver, that you can't, that's not a coaching thing. That's your execution. So I'll see. The Aztecs had major problems early in last season, and it got better. They still, had 8 penalties average a game, which is too high, but it did improve over the course of the season, and we'll see if it improves these next 4 games, right? These next 4 games is ultimately the season for San Diego State in a nutshell, in terms of the bigger picture. Pac-12 teams, your 2 biggest games potentially, other than Fresno State, on the conference schedule. So it's going to have to be fixed sooner than later.
Yeah, and I think a lot of things go both ways. I mean, if you look at where the offside penalties happened against Coastal Carolina, the last one was with 13:51 left in the game, or a drive that started there. And then, like you said, they shut it down. But they also, were sustaining drives, because they were 3rd and 7, 3rd and 9. And I think that one mistake that Coastal Carolina did is they never went deep. When they were jumping offside, and they were multiples in a row on one drive, and they had such a hard time in the red zone scoring, that not taking shots and just saying, hey, we have an attempt here. And so I think both of these teams, the coaching staff is saying, we can't jump offside. And they're also saying, these teams are undisciplined. And when they jump off sides, we got to try to take a shot. The team that is able, I think, maybe to take advantage of that lack of discipline, I think is really, really important. I think a scary part for San Diego State is, with that very good pass rush against Idaho State, which, is not going to have the athletes that UCLA has, obviously, they can get pressure with four and force, Jalen Maiden to be able to throw into windows and to do those things that they can be in tight coverage. The flip side of that was they didn't do a good job of covering Coastal Carolina, who almost threw for 300 yards. So, it just depends which way it's going to go. And then I think ultimately, a lot of these games are going to come down to, penalties. And I think they're going to come down to whether or not San Diego State can run the football. And so I think that's a really big key because, Coastal Carolina could not. And that is part of what allows a team to be able to just kind of pin their ears back and go for it. They had 34 attempts, Coastal Carolina did, but only 56 yards. I mean, that's an unbelievably good day for UCLA's defense. And, if the Aztecs don't have success running the ball, setting up, as you talked about in your preview, those third and shorts, the ability to not allow those defensive ends to kind of pin their ears back and just get after the quarterback. I think that's really big. I think the spread, I think it started good. Yeah. I'm not sure. That's a good question. Would you take 14.5 for UCLA?
I think San Diego State will cover.
I do too.
9 is and we can talk about this when we get to the end with our prediction.
Okay.
I think 9 is a borderline, but 14.5, I think it would be tough to go with UCLA plus or minus 14.5. That's a lot of points on the road in this kind of a matchup where San Diego State has had success against Pac-12 teams, not last year, but in previous years.
Absolutely. So it'll be really interesting to see.
I think the whole third down thing is important because they cannot get into third and long situations against this defensive line. And then so that goes back to, okay, what do you do on first down? You want to run the ball. You're going to win this game by controlling the ball and rushing for 250 yards, let's say. Let's say that's a game plan, right? That's Brady Hoke's game plan, Ryan Lindley. But if you come out of the gates and you run on first down, run on second down, you're not going to get a first down. You're not going to get 5-6 yards every play. Is that really setting yourself up for success to get to third downs as opposed to coming out and throwing more on first down, trying to get 7-8 yards or trying to get a first down and moving the chains and getting the momentum that way? So that's what Ryan Lindley has to be considering as he's calling this game plan is you want to run the ball. At the end of the day, you want to end up with a certain number of yards in time of possession battle, but you can't get yourself too caught up in we're just going to run first down, second down and see where we're at, because that's not the recipe that's going to work. And so I think you could see more passes, more screens, more play actions on first down than maybe we saw last week or the week before. Just because I think you can't get yourself too set in run on first and second down and then hope, you get convert third down. Coastal Carolina was 8 for 16 on third down. They controlled 35 minutes of the clock.
Yeah.
But they couldn't finish drives, as you said. Red zone issues, right. Turnovers. They missed a field goal. I think that it was a 50-plus field goal, but still, those are points that they could not finish. They could not finish drives with points. And San Diego State's going to have to finish drives, especially if they're controlling the ball and they're winning the time of possession, because UCLA can strike on one play. You saw it last week. J. Mike Sturdivant is super talented. The corner Des Malone and Noah Tumlin are going to have their hands full, but I think they'll be up to the challenge. I mean, they haven't had too much outside receivers to have to really worry about through the first two games. Most of the guys have been slot guys for the first two games. And so I think they'll be up for the challenge, but there's one, you get beat once and it could be 7.
Yeah, I think everything you said is really, really good and right. Adding to that, I think that a lot of it's going to depend on how Kurt Maddox's defense stacks up against UCLA. If San Diego State is able to control UCLA's offense, then you're comfortable with saying, okay, well, we're going to try to play some field position. We're going to try to figure out that aspect of it. The flip side of it is if they feel like they're going to have to score in the 30s or close to 30s to be able to win this game, then I think you're going to have to, kind of let it loose a little bit. And, it's an interesting just place where they're at because, obviously Jalen Maiden has done a great job on not throwing turnovers. The question is he being too gun shy in trying to avoid those, which is why his passing numbers have fallen off. And I think that ultimately is San Diego State's hope in this game. I think given the youth of the players at UCLA, the fact that they're moving them all around, it would not surprise me if, we're talking about this at the beginning of next week and we're talking about how, the best quarterback on the field was Jalen Maiden. And if we're able to say that, then I think San Diego State really has a puncher's chance to be able to win the game. But I think they're going to need, just some of that Maiden magic, just something that is off script, something that picks up a first down, that picks up a big play, where he just is a great athlete. He finds the open guy, he knows what's going on, and he really steps up and becomes the quarterback that he's been, but they need it against UCLA. Like it's not, we can talk about consistency later on, but they need the great version of Maiden to be able to walk away, I think, with a victory on Saturday.
Yeah, one thing we should mention, Brandon Crenshaw-Dixon is back from his 2-game suspension. And, no better of a game to come back to than to have to play possibly one of the best edge rushers in the country, Latu. And, he had 3 sacks last week. He said he wants to get 15 this year after getting 10.5 last year. So BCD being back, his experience should help hopefully solidify that offensive line because they're going to have their hands full. And the other guy on the other side of the ball that I mentioned in my preview is Garrett Fountain. Last year, every time Fountain was in there, he was making plays. He was standing out. And so far over 2 games, he hasn't necessarily done that. This could be a great opportunity for him to kind of make his big appearance in the 2023 season. He's a team captain. I think this could be his breakout game where he can impact the game, whether it's a sack, whether it's a tackle for a loss, whether it's some sort of a turnover, things like that. So I'm looking to see Garrett Fountain kind of have a good game today this week.
Yeah, and I don't know if the third quarterback, the running quarterback, is how much he'll play and things of that nature. San Diego State, obviously, I think it's had some trouble with quarterbacks that can move and kind of keep it alive a little bit, and that could also be why Chip Kelly wants to play him because that's been a stationary target for the blitz packages and stuff. But I think first and foremost for the Aztecs is they got to be able to stop the run. The pressure that Coastal Carolina was able to get on UCLA was limited because the Bruins ran for almost 5 yards of carry, and if the Aztecs can make them one-dimensional and make those quarterbacks have to be UCLA's best player, I think that's another big recipe for success. And so that's, I think, is something to look for. The same thing is, how many yards does UCLA need to be able to pick up first down, I think, is another thing. And then the other thing that I would be looking for, and I would expect San Diego State, it's interesting. Generally speaking, I would think you would think San Diego State could be better at it, which would be they're in the snap count because you have a quarterback who's older, been around and that sort of thing, and you're not running in 3 different voices, right? Flip side of it is we know where San Diego State and their discipline on the offensive line has been. And so I don't know necessarily if that's true, but that's another way. You get screen game, short passing game, running game, and then you vary the snap count, and that can go a long way towards being able to slow down the rush, which I think is going to be a huge thing. But I think San Diego State has a punching chance. Is it ready for prediction time?
Yeah.
Let me hear it.
I think Snapdragon is going to be a fun atmosphere. It sounds like there could be a full house, or at least close to a full house as you can get for a football game. I think San Diego State will play their best game of the season, considering the opponent and the quality of the opponent. But I've got UCLA winning 27-20. Close game throughout.
Close game throughout. Yeah, I agree with everything you just said. It's been interesting to hear people's interpretations of things that I've written. That's always a fun thing. Usually half the time they're off the wall. But I pointed out that I felt like Ohio and Idaho State both came into the game and did their game plan better than the Aztecs did. That they were more disciplined, and the game went according to the script that Idaho State predicted and Ohio predicted. Like they gave themselves a chance because they were able to implement their game plan. And I think people have taken that, and you can take it any way you want, as a sign that maybe there's something wrong with SDSU. But I would look at it personally as saying, like, if you have that much turnover between last year's roster and this year, and you expected them to be able to just hit the ground running, Idaho State, they had no film on. Only Idaho State knew what they were doing. Ohio has been together they have all kinds of veterans returning. And so I actually thought that the fact that they won both of those games, I think really speaks to the talent level of this team and potentially where their ceiling is. And so I actually think that they're going to do the opposite. They're going to do everything that you just said, but it'll be enough. And San Diego State is going to win. And they're going to have their first 2-game winning streak against UCLA. Because we like doing this score stuff. Let's do score stuff. I'm going to go with 27-23 as the final. San Diego State will win the game, and everyone will be 3-0, and the sour taste in everyone's mouth because of Idaho State is going to go away.
Yeah, I mean, you have to almost remind yourself that San Diego State is 2-0 based on so much of the commentary that's out there. Obviously, the social media is prevalent in what I mean by out there. But yeah, you have to remind yourself that this team is 2-0, and by beating UCLA, they would be 3-0 with a huge win over a talented Pac-12 team. So I do think it'll be a close game. As I said earlier, I think the 14.5 is a little extreme, but we'll see how it turns out. But I think I'm looking forward to an electric Snapdragon Stadium. The first 2 games obviously have been nowhere near electric, or being able to use the adjective to describe it by far. And I think that's what I'm looking for. I think there will be a decent amount of UCLA fans there, as Matt pointed out. It's funny, Matt and his wife Andrea, they live in San Diego, and he mentioned to me, I think it was after we stopped recording, that it's going to be his shortest commute to a game that he's been covering. Right?
Awesome.
So yeah, I think it's going to be really fun time, and I think the game's going to be close, and I think San Diego State has a chance to win it. I think notion about you play up to the level of talent, you play down to the level of talent. I think there's truth to that. Whether San Diego State has done that or not, or will do that, I don't know. But I think that there is truth to that, and I think these guys are ready to play and ready to show what they can do on a national stage on Big Boy CBS.
I agree, man. I agree, and it's incredibly exciting, and I'm not one to get too far ahead, even though it's only from the recording this a couple of days away. I'm looking forward to having you over for dinner, bro.
Oh yeah.
Before then, man. So we'll be able to talk through this fully.
Yeah, for sure. All right, that is going to do it for us. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing Matt Stevens' perspective on the UCLA Bruins, and then our kind of roundup of what we've seen and what we've read for this matchup. Saturday night, 4:30 p.m. CBS, Snapdragon Stadium. Hope to see you guys all out there. As always, we appreciate you guys listening, and we'll talk to you guys next week. You are listening to the SDSU podcast presented by the East Village Times with your hosts Andre Hagberdian and Paul Garrison.